So, hi everyone, and welcome to this delayed version of the lineup. Today is August the 16th, 2024. I'm Barry Stagner, and my apologies for uh, putting out the program a day late, but kind of an interesting lesson. I had upgraded my download speed and found out that my router that I was currently using and have had for some years was not compatible with the new speed. And so I went down to the local Cox distributor or office, that is, and grabbed their Panorama Wi-Fi, and it wouldn't work, and I couldn't get it. They deactivated my old router so they can activate the new, and anyway, just a series of crazy events. We lost everything in the house as far as anything that is related to Wi-Fi, and the tech was finally able to show up on Friday morning. That would be today, and that was when the scheduled appointment was. And the poor guy was here for over 2 hours, and he was looking outside. He was checking our connection, just all kinds of things that he was, the hoops that he was jumping through to try and get us back online. And then after probably the eighth or ninth attempt to see if there was signal getting to the router, he kind of frustrated. He took the connecting wire off or cable off, and just happened to take a look. And after all that, this was the culprit. There's a wire on the inside that was bent over, and he cut it off, obviously, put a new one on, reconnected it, and within 10 minutes, everything was up. The router was activated, and we were back in business. So, my apologies for all that, but obviously, I think most of us are well aware of what's going on in Israel. Amir is keeping everybody up to speed with developing events there, and there's been lots of reports of boots on the ground from people in Israel talking about the intimidation factor that the Iranians are hoping to impose upon the Israelis by waiting and not reacting as of yet. And yet, the people on the streets seem to have the perception that, well, what's going to happen is going to happen. So I'm just going to keep living my life. I watched an interview of a young woman in Tel Aviv today who was just saying, it is what it is, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And so, you know, that's kind of the general attitude. But I kind of skipped over what I wanted to, why I showed this to you, and I just thought, that's a lot like our problems. We see them as just monumental, impacting all kinds of things, and then just one little tweak, and everything's back in order. And that's the business that God is in. He's in the repair, the tweak things business, and restoring things for us. And so often, I think we just get so focused on the consequences and the externals, and just a little bit of attention and a little minor adjustment, and things get back in tune with Him. And He's always at the ready to fix what's broken in us. And I'm glad that He does. Aren't you glad that He who began a good work doesn't stop before He's finished, but He will be faithful to complete it until the day of Jesus Christ? Well, let's jump into our stories. And the first comes from the Israel National News, a paper called Erut Sheva. And it says that there is a joint statement offered by 5 nations calling on Iran to stand down from threats against Israel. The US, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy published a joint statement on Monday calling on all sides to de-escalate as Iran and Hezbollah prepare to attack Israel, and for Israel and Hamas to conclude a ceasefire and hostage deal as soon as possible. The joint statement reads, leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Italy expressed their full support for ongoing efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East and reach a ceasefire and hostage deal, release deal in Gaza. They endorsed the call from President Biden, President Sisi of Egypt, Amir Tamim of Qatar to renew talks later this week with the goal of concluding the deal as soon as possible. They also stressed that there is no more time to lose and added that all parties must live up to their responsibilities. They stated that unfettered delivery and distribution of aid is needed and expressed their support for the defense of Israel against Iranian aggression and attacks by Iran-backed terrorist groups, and the leaders called on Iran to stand down on its ongoing threats of a military attack against Israel and discussed the serious consequences for regional security should such an attack take place. Israel, as small as it is, some 9 million people, 7 million of them being Jews, is a mighty force militarily, and most nations don't want to mess with the nation. But we also have to remember that God is for them. And I don't know why there's so many Christians that have a problem with this. And just hearing, even this week, a pastor online, saying that he doesn't believe that this current nation of Israel is biblical Israel and that the regathering of the Jews will happen at the millennium. And, statements like that are just so strange and bizarre in light of the fact that everything the Bible said would happen to the regathered Jews is happening to them. The nations in the Ezekiel war scenario are gathered against them. And, that whole thing, that whole idea that this is going to happen during the millennium breaks down when you include things like the Ezekiel war. The millennium is not going to be a time of war. And it's not until the Jews are back in the land and the land is flourishing like it is today that the Ezekiel war is going to take place. Now, if you want to jump through the hoop of making allegory or figurative meanings out of all these literal events that are described in places like Israel, well, then you got another problem because you have to start making stuff up. Well, Israel is the land of Israel. The people of Israel are the Jews. God has brought them back into the land like he promised he would, even after years of diaspora, having scattered them himself among the nations, and has proclaimed in Ezekiel 36 that every day they were outside of the land, his name was being profaned. Now, Eretz Sheva again reports that the Iranian officials say Iran may not attack if a ceasefire is reached. And 3 Iranian officials told Reuters that Iran may delay or even call off its planned attack against Israel if this week's talk on a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas are successful. 3 Iranian senior officials told Reuters that they could either delay it or cancel this planned attack if the ceasefire talks are arrived at and successful again. According to 3 officials, only a ceasefire in Gaza could prevent or delay the response to the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran 2 weeks ago. However, one of them emphasized that if the ceasefire talks collapse, or if Israel takes drags from the attack, will be carried out. Not sure if Israel takes drags, not sure what that means. Then the attack will be carried out. In addition, the sources said that Iran is considering sending representatives to the negotiations for the first time since the beginning of the war. And Iran has been openly speaking of its intentions to launch an attack against Israel since Haniyeh's assassination. Well, that's because they were totally humiliated that someone within several hundred meters of the presidential palace could destroy or kill, actually, a visiting dignitary. And again, so they've got egg on their face, so to speak, and that's really that is the whole of the issue. And all Israel news reports a massive cyber attack cripples banks in Iran, while Supreme Leader Khamenei vows divine wrath if Iran backs down from attacking Israel. He has no clue what he's talking about because there will be divine wrath, but it won't be from Allah. It will be from Jehovah, the God of the Bible. With Israel continuing to await the promised Iranian retaliatory attack for the alleged Israeli assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran 2 weeks ago, most media coverage is focused on Iran's blustering threats and Israeli preparations. The Iranian regime appears indecisive and is facing internal criticism, with the new government already showing signs of disarray, even before a massive cyber attack reportedly crippled the nation's banking system on Wednesday. According to opposition news outlet Iran International, the cyber attack significantly disrupted the operations of the Central Bank of Iran and other financial institutions, shutting down all computer systems. The attack was described as one of the largest ever on Iran's state infrastructure. According to reports in Israeli media, signs were hung on ATM machines across the nation on Wednesday, which read, Announcement by the central bank. Dear citizens, it is not possible to withdraw money because all the bad money and resources were divided or diverted to the war affairs of the corrupt regime. We are very sorry. And unlike similar previous cases, the government has so far not accused Israel or made any other comments, and there has only been limited corroboration of the report from social media. And reports indicate that Israel has previously conducted several cyber attacks on Iranian state infrastructure, targeting facilities such as train stations and gas stations. And earlier this week, the World Bank had warned the regime that a large scale war with Israel would have catastrophic consequences for its economy, including a higher level of unemployment among youth, which is already some 40%, a decrease in foreign investment, and rapid currency devaluation. The inevitable devaluation of the Iranian currency would reignite inflation. The report stated the Iranian government would be forced to divert a significant portion of its budget to defense and military needs at the expense of critical social and economic goals. And this makes a couple of points. One, obviously, Israel, who most likely is behind this cyber attack, is sending another type of shot across the bow, so to speak, following the one that's already been made with the elimination of Ismail Haniyeh. That the Iranians are not protected from their efforts, and they can get in and shut down their system if they want. And again, recognizing that most likely Israel is responsible for this, as we mentioned there at the end of that article. They've already done it before, but shutting down the economy is catastrophic, to say the least. But this also reminds us that this plays a significant part of the tribulation period. And, watching all the things we're seeing happening today, the development of the global system, not just a governmental system, but the big push for economic unity around the world, all people with this egalitarian mindset of the day, all people having the same thing and just being a single form of currency, so to speak, which we really don't need because all the machines that we have, the technology that we have today can make all the conversions in a split second. You can get money in your own currency from any place in the world. And but the mechanics are there. But you just have to wonder what role cyber warfare is going to play during that time. And, there's descriptions in Ezekiel, about horsemen and shields and bucklers, very archaic weaponry is being described there. And, it would be a curious departure from the literalness of the balance of the passage to say that this is just speaking of modern warfare when there's other ways to describe the modern weapons, and horses and shields and bucklers isn't necessarily a way to do that, as we see, in other places in Scripture, like with the bow and the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6:2. That is symbolic of a covenant, and then we have an Old Testament precedent for that with the word rainbow all the way back in Genesis, at least in the Greek translations of the Old Testament known as the Septuagint. But you just have to wonder, could there be such a cyber warfare? Could there be, coronal mass ejection? And that's one of the big fears about that issue that we talk about from Revelation 16. And we even brought it up last week. Not just the power to scorch men's bodies, but if there is a major coronal mass ejection and all this plasma, this radioactive plasma, bombards the Earth, breaking down the magnetosphere, it will disable every electronic device on the planet, or at least in the direction that the coronal mass ejection does strike the Earth and break down the magnetosphere and the ozone layers we talked about last week. So interesting that we see this cyber warfare happening. And then you've got this mention. I've always, again, found that kind of curious. Why are horses and horseback battles mentioned, at this point in time? Could it be that the systems are shut down, and maybe that's why, the mark of the beast, which, by the way, the word Revelation 13 for mark means kragma. It's something on the surface of the skin. It's a brand. It can be translated as a brand or an etching. And maybe it's just something as simple as a tattoo that identifies you as a follower of the beast, that allows you to buy and sell because, there's no electronic equipment that will allow you to access your funds or any of those kind of things. Total speculation, I know, but it's just a curiosity that we see these kind of things that are now part of modern warfare. But maybe it's a good time to pause and say, we won't be here to find out whether it's an actual mark, whether it's just a tattoo, something visible that identifies you as a follower of the beast, or if it's some type of biotat that's interactive with technical systems. We're going to be in the Father's house with the Lord the whole time that the tribulation is going on. So we should take heart in that at all times. Now, the Times of Israel says the U.S. leads the international condemnation of Ben Gvir's provocations at the Temple Mount. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken led widespread criticism of National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir Tuesday for declaring that Jewish prayer is allowed atop the Temple Mount, slamming the far-right political leader's announcement and visit to the Flashpoint site as a provocation liable to set the region aflame. Ben Gvir's moves, which violate the status quo governing the sensitive holy site and directly contradicting Prime Minister Netanyahu's own directives, earned condemnation from the United States, the EU, the UN, United Nothing, France, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and others. And Ben Gvir's visit demonstrated blatant disregard for the historic status quo with respect to the holy sites in Jerusalem, Blinken said in a statement late Tuesday. Well, Blinken, you obviously don't know history, and you don't know anything apparently about the history of Islam. Uh, Jerusalem is mentioned over 830 times in the Bible, and Jerusalem is not mentioned even one time in the Quran. And the faraway mosque that's mentioned in the Quran is not in Jerusalem. It's actually in Saudi Arabia, just like Mecca, just like Medina. So if there's any place that the Jews ought to be able to pray, it's on the site of Solomon's temple and Herod's temple, both of which were destroyed, as we mentioned just this past week, or we all saw, I think, this past week, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day that both temples were destroyed, and potential for an attack from Iran and Hezbollah on that day that never materialized. But again, if there's one place where the Jews ought to be able to pray, it's on the Temple Mount. And, just this world, as that last portion of the article said, it's a fear factor that we don't want to set the Middle East ablaze and all that. Well, it's going to happen eventually, and God is going to fight how he fights in the day of battle, according to Zechariah 14. And we also know in Ezekiel 39 that the Lord is going to destroy the invading armies of the Ezekiel war coalition and leave them dead on the mountains of Israel, taking 7 months to bury the dead after God does what he's going to do. And, this would be a different world if people knew the truth, if they knew what the Bible said, if they knew what God says he's going to do, and decisions were based on that. And, we're not talking about, forcing the whole world to be Christians, but the truth of the matter is, if people were more understanding in places of power of what the Bible has to say, then we would see different actions on the part of those who are in charge, so to speak. Now, the Associated French Press reports that in Turkey, Abbas declares he'll go to Gaza even if it costs my life as he mourns the loss of Ismail Haniyeh. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas told a special session of the Turkish parliament on Thursday that he would travel to the Gaza Strip, where 10 months of war have left rival faction Hamas battered and largely unable to rule. Abbas' declaration that he would lead a delegation to the enclave came as negotiators met in the Qatari capital of Doha to attempt to hammer out the final details of an elusive deal meant to halt fighting in the enclave and free hostages held there by the Hamas terror group. I have decided to go to Gaza with other brothers from the Palestinian leadership, Abbas said to the applause of Turkish lawmakers. I will do that, even if it would cost my life. Abbas added in remarks translated into Turkish from Arabic, our life is not more worthy than the life of a child. And this coming in support of the group that executed children and carve them up and set them on fire while they're still alive. Just lunacy. With Israel currently controlling all entry points into the Strip, Abbas will not be able to enter the enclave without approval and coordination with Jerusalem. Access to the enclave has been severely restricted since October 7th, when Hamas carried out an unprecedented attack from Gaza, killing some 1,200 people in Gaza, kidnapping 251, mostly civilians. And the Ramallah-based Abbas heads Fatah, which controls the PA in the West Bank, but was violently ousted from Gaza by Hamas in a 2007 coup. Abbas has not been able to been to the enclave since, though he also vowed in 2017 to travel to Gaza during a short-lived Fatah Hamas rapprochement. The trip never took place, and a year later, when PA Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah attempted to visit Gaza, he was targeted by a car bomb in a failed assassination attempt by Palestinians in the Strip. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to eliminate Hamas, but has also rejected international pressure for control of the Gaza Strip to be handed to the Palestinian Authority following the war. He went on to say, Gaza is ours as a whole. We don't accept any solution that would divide our territories, he told the parliament. And there's an interesting thing about this title that these people, these Arabs who live in the Gaza Strip, have associated with themselves, and that is the term Palestinian. Looking back to 136 AD with the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who renamed the area Palestina. He did so as an insult to the Jews. He was tired of their revolts and the problems that they were causing within his kingdom. He killed hundreds of thousands of Jews. He made it illegal to use the term Jew. Two Jews were not allowed to be found walking together, and other heinous things. But the creme de la creme, so to speak, or the icing on the cake, was renaming the area after the ancient enemies of Israel, the Philistines. Now, in Latin, the word Philistine is Palestina. So these people, who are clearly Arabs, are claiming to be the Philistines just by name, even though in ignorance they are using it. But the truth of the matter is, the Philistines were not Arabs. The Philistines, some believe, were from the island of Crete. And I read some time ago that they were even referred to as the Aegean Sea people by some historians. So now, whether that's true or not is yet to be seen. But someone did report that in one of my studies some years ago. But the one thing we do know is the Philistines were not Arabs, and so this whole thing unravels rather quickly if you really dig in to the history, which Blinken obviously doesn't know. The Times of Israel says that the Saudi crown prince said he fears assassination over Israel normalization. And according to a report in Politico, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as he's referred to, invoked slain peacemaker Anwar Sadat in conversations with U.S. lawmakers to underscore his own personal risk. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told visiting U.S. lawmakers that he fears being assassinated because of his pursuit of normalization with Israel, obviously. And according to the report published on Wednesday, citing three people briefed on the conversations, the Crown Prince indicated that he still intends to move ahead with forging ties with the Jewish state, though he fears it could cost him his life. Bin Salman, commonly referred to as MBS, reportedly at least once referenced the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, who was shot dead by Islamist terrorists in 1981, 2 years after he signed a peace agreement with Israel. MBS asked his interlocutors what the U.S. had done to protect Sadat after the landmark peace deal. The Crown Prince was said to have cited the risk of assassination in explaining why any normalization deal between Riyadh and Jerusalem must include a true path to a Palestinian state, something the current Israeli government publicly opposes. Now, this is interesting that he would make such a statement that, he's going to move forward, even though he recognizes that it puts him in peril from his fellow Muslims. and some extremist, he's concerned, may take his life. And he cites again the Anwar Sadat, Egyptian president, in that assassination some years ago. But the curious thing is, I think, in light of what we do know is going to happen in the Ezekiel war, when these nations have a hook in the jaw and they're drawn down from the north, and God is going to fight against those nations with an earthquake, flooding rain, and hail and fire and brimstone. We do know that the one nation, or one of the nations, I should say, that are going to protest this invasion is Saudi Arabia. The Arab Gulf states could be implied by the phrase Sheba and Dedan, which is the Arab Gulf state geographic area. But who knows who all is going to participate? But MBS seems to be leading the charge in making sure that this moves forward. So again, isn't it amazing to see these things line up? And for someone, when you have so many people who are, they don't even like Mahmoud Abbas. He doesn't even live in the area that he's associated with and so burdened about because he's in fear. And so many of the other Hamas leaders and Palestinian leaders live in other countries like Qatar or Turkey. And why? Because they're afraid. And yet here we've got this guy, who has a legitimate reason to be concerned, especially over Islamic extremism, who is the crown prince from the country where Islam was started and founded, who's in fear for his life, but he's still going to move forward. We're watching just amazing things happen, and prophetic things being appointed to or moving toward the ultimate fulfillment that is yet future, and just incredible time for us to be alive. And that should, I think, always when we see things like this developing, we need to make sure that we are understanding the majesty of the book that we have titled the Bible. And it is infallible, it's divinely inspired, hasn't been replaced. The Dead Sea Scrolls did a lot to silence many of the accusers of what we have today is not the Bible that was originally written. There's some 40,000 partials and fragments of New Testament manuscripts that we could piece together the original content from those and eliminate anything that may have been a scribal error or copyist error, and know that we do have the infallible Word of God. It was not written by man. For 1,500 years, the Bible has been penned, and 40 different authors from 3 different continents who never met by and large. And it's just impossible for man to have written the Word of God. And here we are watching details, specifics that are in preparation for the Ezekiel war, the tribulation period happening right in front of us. Now, one of the things I think we always have to keep in mind as we move toward that globalist agenda that's going to take place under the Antichrist, and a lot of guys who want to sit on the World Economic Forum board are not going to be players. They're not going to have anything to do with this coming system, because there's one, and Revelation 17 talks about those who are with this coming one, the man of sin, the lawless one, have not received a kingdom as of yet. So they're not current political leaders. But what we do see with all of this mentality that's developing around the world, this fascination with communism and Marxism and all these other things that so many young people have been duped into believing, is the need of all these types of governmental system to control the narrative. And the American Military News reports that the UK police chief threatens to jail Americans over their online posts. The head of London's Metropolitan Police Service has issued a warning that UK officials will not only target British citizens for sharing content and commentary pertaining to the violent riots and clashes between protesters and counter-protesters, but that officials will also target and potentially extradite and jail American citizens for sharing online content. Fox News reported that Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley recently told a Sky News reporter, "We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you." Well, I'd like to see you fulfill that one there, Mr. Commissioner. According to Fox News, violent riots have plagued the UK following allegations that an asylum seeker was responsible for a mass stabbing incident that resulted in the death of 3 girls and multiple other individuals being injured at a Taylor Swift themed dance event. While the suspect has reportedly been identified as an 18-year-old British citizen, Fox News reported that protests against the country's massive immigration numbers have persisted throughout the UK. Fox News reported that videos of the violent encounters between anti immigration protesters and counter protesters have circulated online, prompting the UK to issue warnings against social media content. However, the latest warning from UK officials not only threatened to jail British citizens, but also to extradite and jail American citizens for violating the country's social media rules. Well, again, Mr. Commissioner, we don't live there, and you can't come here and take us for reporting on such things. And just this whole mentality is so bizarre. But again, this just feeds into that one world government thing that's on the horizon that, again, we won't be here for. But just the thinking is so bizarre that you're going to extradite people for their social media content because it's exposing the ridiculous things that have gone on. And, these people that are protesting against this, are tired of seeing their money go to support those who are bent on their own destruction. And again, this kind of gets back to the absolute idiocy of people in places of power today. Islam is not just a religion, it's also a political body. It has a political component to it known as Sharia law. And to the Muslim, the only way for the world to be governed is to be a global caliphate under Sharia law. And yet, you've got these people that act like, well, we got to open the doors and let them in, because they're in need. And, of course we are to be a passionate and compassionate people. But, to bring people in who are bent on your own country's destructions, that's not passion. That's foolishness. The Guardian reports that an Iranian woman is reportedly paralyzed in shooting over alleged hijab law violation. A woman is reported to have been left paralyzed after being shot by Iranian police who were attempting to stop her car over alleged violations of Iran's draconian hijab laws. According to human rights groups and sources inside Iran, Rezu Badri was driving home in the northern city of Nur on the 22nd of July when police attempted to pull her car over and was identified as being on an impoundment list. Last year, as a part of the clampdown on women defying Iran's compulsory dress code, Iranian authorities said they would use CCTV to identify female drivers who were failing to cover their hair and confiscate their vehicles. Human rights activists in Iran, a nonprofit NGO, said it believed Badri might have been seen or filmed driving with her head uncovered in the days before the shooting, and an alert had been placed on her number plate. Here you are in your own car, driving by yourself with your hair uncovered, and now she's a paraplegic because they shot her for showing her hair. And we have to remember, all these things with the modesty police and all that in Iran is all so women keep themselves covered so men don't lust after them. Well, how about guys, you just control yourself? And, I better stop before I start getting mad. It's just, again, such a bizarre thing. And yet, again, here we have countries all over Europe opening their doors and saying, come on in. And, there's areas in London where the police won't even go because it's Muslim communities. And it shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be anywhere in a country where people aren't safe because of the color of their skin or their religious affiliation or whatever. Fox News reports that Reverend Franklin Graham, calls out evangelicals for Harris for trying to mislead people using his father in an ad. Harris Walls would be the most anti-Christian administration in American history, according to Ryan Walters. Christian evangelist Franklin Graham blasted the Evangelicals for Harris organization for using footage of his late father in an attack ad against former President Trump. Graham is the president and CEO of Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and Samaritan's Purse, which was founded by his father, the late Billy Graham. And Billy Graham, obviously a world-known evangelist. A statue of him was placed inside the U.S. Capitol in May, and Evangelicals for Harris, formerly Evangelicals for Biden, is a Project of Faith Voters 501c4 organization. And on Wednesday, the group held a Zoom conference hosted by reparations activist Ekemini Uvan, who had argued that whiteness is wicked and the police as an institution needs to be destroyed and rebuilt. Policing was founded on the re-enslavement of black people, he went on to say. And a new attack ad from the pro-Harris organization against Trump juxtaposes footage of the late Billy Graham talking about confessing one's sins in an old interview of Trump, saying he wasn't sure at the time whether he had ever asked God for forgiveness. And Franklin Graham responded on X by sharing a screenshot of the ad on the official Morning Joe account and condemning evangelicals for Harris for using his father's image. He argued that if his father were alive, he would support Trump. The liberals are using anything and everything they can to promote candidate Harris. They even developed a political ad trying to use my father's image, he wrote in a social media post. They are trying to mislead people. Maybe they don't know that my father appreciated the conservative values and policies of President Trump in 2016. And if he were alive today, my father's views and opinions would not have changed. The issue, Franklin said, is that in your worship of Trump, you have forsaken the gospel, the group's account posted. The Evangelicals for Harris posted that. Remember the calling to which you were called. You know the Lord's grace is always ready to receive you. And at the Republican National Convention, Franklin Graham led a prayer thanking God for saving Trump's life. And, there's so many things. And, don't get all upset if you're an anti-Trumper or whatever. One thing I think we have to recognize is that we don't support people who support killing babies in the womb or restricting the freedom of speech or the right to bear arms. We don't support anti-Constitution people. And really, that's what we've been seeing. And it's just a bizarre time in our country. And, one of the things I think that's worth mentioning is the fact that, Revelation 1 opens with a statement from Jesus that he's going to show through his angel things to John that will shortly take place. And that word means to happen in quick succession. And isn't it wild how our country has changed so dramatically in such a short time? There is no ability to agree to disagree agreeably. Hurt feelings are equal to an act of violence today. Sexual preference is now equated to skin color as far as the 1964 Civil Rights Act or Title VII within it. It's just insane the things we're watching happen. But you know what? The deception of the Antichrist requires an insane world. And we have it with us today. Reuters says the UN takes step forward to create a one world government. The United Nations is a serious threat to our future. Not only should the U.S. withdraw from the UN, it should be thrown out of New York City. The Biden administration refuses to seek peace with Russia and has no intention of negotiating with Russia. And that effectively says the UN is just a dog and pony show with no purpose other than to expand its own power, as well as the World Health Organization, to create its long-term dream of ruling the entire world. From the very beginning, the UN has indulged in self-aggrandizement to elevate itself to a de facto world government. They have been a proponent of tyranny, even using climate change and health, that they alone should be in charge. This treaty they just proposed is called the Comprehensive International Convention on Countering the Use of Information and Communication Technologies for Criminal Purposes, pretending this is about cybercrime. It is not. It's about censorship, just like we saw in the earlier story coming out of the UK. The UN claims this is the only way to create peace by putting them in charge of the world. Unelected, of course. They encouraged this war between the West and Russia because they believed that they could emerge as the great peacemaker which would finally justify their assumption of dominion over the entire world. The power-hungry UN approved its first international cybercrime treaty despite significant objections from all the tech companies and human rights groups. This treaty is highly dangerous and will tear the world apart and further suppress human rights, which is the objective of the United Nations, just as we are witnessing with all of these hate speech crimes and imprisonment for merely criticizing a government, as in Britain and Ireland. This has been part of the World Economic Forum's 2030 agenda of world domination. Schwab is a control freak, not unlike Joseph Stalin, who launched his Great Purge to silence all of his critics. Just thinking about these past couple of days, what a weird thing it is to all of a sudden be disconnected from your source of information. Thankfully, our cell phones and the data option on our cell phones allowed us to stay in touch with what's going on out there in the world. But, just losing the ability to communicate is a significant thing in this day and age. And even to record a program like this or broadcast a program like this, it's a weird feeling. And now here we've got those who want to take control of that, and just another push toward what is ultimately going to happen during the tribulation. And again, I think a timely moment to remind us we won't be here. And again, I say that for two reasons. I think we always need to keep in mind that there is coming a glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. And he is going to appear in the air, and the dead in Christ are going to raise from the dead, and we who are alive and remain will meet them in the air to forever be with the Lord. And therefore, we ought to take heart that, one, we're not going to see the ultimate development in this, but also we ought to have a passion for those around us who are lost and perishing. And there's multitudes and multitudes of them. And, just watching our world and, the things that are happening in our world today, and just the evil that is present, and all these things that, we couldn't even dream of less than a generation ago, 10, 15 years ago. We would have had no idea. If somebody would have told you the world was going to be like this, and it was basically hate to say that a man's not a woman, nobody would have believed that. But yet, here we are. So again, here's what I want to remind you of. The pace is going to continue all the way up until the moment where that moment and twinkling of an eye happens, and we are taken to be with the Lord and put on immortal incorruptibility, that we might live forever and ever in absolute perfection, physical perfection, and spiritual too. For when we see the Lord, 1 John 3:2 says, then we will be like him. In other words, we won't have any pride. We won't have any ego. We'll be perfect physically. We'll be perfect spiritually, and therefore morally, and everything else that comes with that. And that's what's going to make us capable to rule and reign with Christ when this world comes to an end. Well, that's about it for this week. And again, thank you for your patience, and just wanted to run through a couple of things here as we conclude, and just wanted to give you an update. I know some people have asked, even called the church, wanting to know where I'm going to be speaking in the coming months. And so just wanted to give you a little heads up, and you can jot these things down if you have a mind when you hear your state or community come up. On September 14th and 15th, I'm going to be in Franklin, Tennessee. There is a prophecy conference that's going to take place at the Turner Theater at the Factory. And then I will be at Calvary Chapel, Franklin, on Sunday the 15th, speaking there as well. So September 14 and 15, Franklin, Tennessee. If you'd like to go to their website, the church's website, I think the conference is called Eschatology Matters. And then on September 20th or I guess it's the 19th through the 20th, or I don't have my calendar in front of me. Anyway, I will be in Longview, Washington. I don't want to mess this up, so let me check and make sure the dates. So I will be in Longview, Washington, at Calvary Chapel, Longview, On the 21st, that's a men's conference, and then I'll be speaking at the church on the 22nd at both of their um, morning services. So Longview, Washington, Calvary Chapel, Longview, Saturday, a men's conference, Sunday for their church service. That's the 21st and the 22nd. And then on September 27th through the 29th, I will be in Brookville, Ohio. That's not too far from Dayton. And Saturday, there is a prophecy conference that will be held at Harvest Revival Center. And then on Sunday, I'll be speaking at Calvary Chapel Faith Fellowship, which again is not too far, or neither venues are too far from Dayton. So Brookville, Ohio on September 27th. I think I've got my travel dates in there. Yeah, September 28th is the conference. There's a group of speakers. Mondo Gonzalez will be there, as well as Mike Spalding and others who I believe host this conference and have for some years now. And then on the 29th, I'll be speaking at Calvary Chapel Faith Fellowship. So if you're going to be in any of those areas, or if you live in any of those areas and would like to join us, that would be great. And one last thing, if you're out in the Chino Hills area, I am speaking for Pastor Jack this Sunday at all three of their services on Sunday. Really excited about that. A great honor to stand in for Jack, champion for the Lord in these last days and for our country too. And so I think the services are 8, 10:30, and 1, something like that. If you're going to be in the Chino Hills area this coming Sunday, August 18th, little bit of a heads up. The 71 freeway, which you access Chino Hills via the 91, is going to be closed all weekend. So you have to come in off the 60 if you're going to join us for church that day. So, well, that's it for this week. And again, my apologies for the tech mess up and the delay that we had in broadcasting, but so thankful that you have joined us. And let me ask you to please share this simply because it's at a different time, and I've already gotten emails and private messages, what happened to the lineup and all that. So if you wouldn't mind to share this out there on your platforms, I would greatly appreciate it. So obviously a busy season coming up. Your prayers are always appreciated, and I know many of you do. So thank you for that. And, well, you know the drill. We'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless.